So today there was a pretty big shock that's really going to change the landscape of progressive media as a whole, and that is that Jamie Peck has left the Majority Report. It's definitely very shocking. I can't say that I'm super surprised that it happened. It definitely caught me out of nowhere. Is there anybody who looked at that and their initial reaction wasn't to really be shocked or surprised? I mean, it almost feels like you had to have that kind of reaction, right, to this one. And so what you can see is, she says, so tomorrow's my last day at Majority Report. Call in during the fun half to say nice things to me. Wish me a happy birthday and learn about what I'm doing next. This was March 7th, so that was yesterday. Today is March 8th. And Sam Seder sent out a tweet saying, it's Majority Report's loss and the world's gain. Tune in to today's sad but exciting fun half today. So this is obviously a big deal because when it comes to the mainstream progressive outlets, now who are the mainstream progressive outlets? TYT, Secular Talk, Majority Report. These are the ones with like 1 million plus subscribers. I would throw David Pakman in there, but he's so clearly MSNBC at this point. I don't even think he deserves to be in that category in all seriousness. When you look at those shows, there's not really any socialists on there, and the Majority Report for a long time was essentially the exception because they had Michael, who was obviously a socialist, and then Jamie, who was a communist. And, Jamie was definitely more sort of outspoken about her communist beliefs for sure. So that was kind of different there. But none of these other mainstream progressive outlets are bigger, I should say, maybe not mainstream, but just bigger, prominent, right? Because most socialist channels and talk are very fringe channels like mine, or much even smaller, at like 25,000 subscribers or 5 or 10,000 subscribers, something super tiny like that. So this was something that socialists could come around and be really happy about, which is interesting because Sam Seder's a pretty milquetoast social democrat, right? Same thing with Kyle Kulinski. Kyle is somewhere in between a social democrat and democratic socialist. He's in favor of a lot of reforms that exist in other European nations, like Germany's co-determination law, for example. So that's kind of how most things are. Cenk Uygur is pretty heavy capitalist. Anna Kasparian is somewhere between, democratic socialist, social democrat. So this is a definite big shift because now among the prominent progressive channels, there's no real socialist representation. And that's a really interesting turn that's happening here. That was definitely something that kind of diversified the Majority Report. But as you guys know, it didn't always seem to be, it didn't usually seem to be all that cordial. Sam would often, if not always, talk over Jamie. He always had this weird look on his face. Even when Jamie was just speaking, it seemed like, oh my God, get it over with already. And so you can go back, watch that episode where Jimmy Dore went on Fox News on Tucker Carlson and Sam Seder went off and he kind of turned into douchebag mode against Jamie and all of that stuff. So that's the big seismic shift here. There's a serious big, and that socialist following was big defenders of the Majority Report. So now that's gone. So it's interesting to see what exactly is going to result from this. But what's super interesting is it doesn't appear to be as cordial as you think, right? So the question is, okay, well, what was the exit like? Was it mutual? Was it, maybe Jamie just wanted to leave on her own terms. Maybe Sam was just on a new direction. Remember, the Majority Report picked up Emma Vigeland, and so that kind of changes the whole scene, right? That's adding in a new person. She's obviously a pretty milquetoast social democrat, probably more milquetoast than even the other social democrats, right? So, it's changing the direction of the show, right? And so with her, Nomiki, and then Jamie, I guess maybe there were just too many people. And Sam, I guess, just wants to go in a different direction because now it's going to be just all social democrats, essentially. Like I said, not really any socialist representation. But here's what is interesting. It does not appear to be exactly cordial or mutual here. There appears to be some kind of underground beef, essentially. So this is a thread. This right here is the thread. And it's a tweet from, obviously it's the source tweet from Jamie about tomorrow being her last day, which was sent yesterday. Somebody says, too radical for Sam? I knew it. Then another person says, he had her on the shows for years, so I doubt he just realized she's a radical. Um, and then when you go further into the replies, this guy says he just realized that he doesn't want a radical on his show because he is fundamentally an MSNBC shit lib, or at least doesn't mind playing one on TV and YouTube for money. Sam Seder is not in it for the people, lol. And so some people met that, a lot of people actually met that with some pretty, distaste. But what's interesting is Jamie Peck actually herself liked this tweet. So now she's unliked it. But as you can see here, there were 2 favorites on this tweet. Jamie Peck is one of the people who had liked the tweet. So clearly, obviously, anytime you like a tweet like that, someone's response, you're obviously endorsing it, and it's clearly her way of like sending a cloaked message. She obviously, I think, doesn't want to challenge the power that is Sam. Obviously, he's got a lot of fans, right? So that would be pretty trouble for her. To me, this is her way of being like, oh, yeah, this is not cordial, but I don't want to come out face front about this stuff. So clearly they did not get along. This doesn't shock me even remotely that she would feel this way. I mean, Sam Seder was arguably just straight up bullying Jamie on the show, so it's not surprising, shouting her down. It's pretty obvious that this is kind of what was going on, but it does not appear that this was a very maybe it was a mutual departure. Who knows? I don't know. Was Sam Seder just like, hey, I want to go into a more social democratic direction where there's not really any socialist input into this? Who knows? I don't really know. Are they going to replace Jamie with somebody else? I don't know. With Emma Vigeland, then also having, I don't know if they're still having Mickey Const as like a regular guest, but it does get to be quite a few people. And then of course Michael was, also asked the question, was Jamie only still there because Michael was there? Was she only there because he was a socialist voice and she was there to be an addendum, or did he influence them to keep her? I have no idea, but these are all the kinds of questions that people are going to be asking, and this will be a divide amongst a lot of people, obviously, especially within the Majority Report fan base. People who are more in favor of Jamie, people who are in favor of Sam. Obviously both have some pretty strong defenders, but of course Sam Seder has a lot of strong defenders in his audience. But this will definitely be a split. And again, man, this is definitely a big shift for progressive media because socialism is going to be more fringe now. Because being on a platform with 1.2 million subscribers, where Sam Seder was on MSNBC with the Majority Report Sam Seder thing hanging up there, like that's a big platform for a socialist. Even being on a channel with like 100K subscribers is a big platform. You don't really see socialism being really all that prominent like that. Usually if they are, it's more like a sort of social justice channel, like a Sean or someone like that. But they're socialists, but the main content isn't about socialism, right? It's about other stuff, privatizing railways or, other social justice issues, racism, stuff like that. So there's definitely a big shift. They clearly did not, get along with each other. People are gonna, speculate about the departure and all that kind of stuff that's expected to come. But definitely a big day for progressive media, man, for sure.